RogueCon 23. That's right. It is here. It's not back. It's here. It's the first one. Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It is all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues, January 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, if you want to go, you got to get tickets, and tickets are on sale at RogueCon23.com. That's RogueCon, RogueCon 23.com. Be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go. Coming up on the Payoff. Certain people in relationships just come into your life, and you would call it on the other side of addiction and sobriety, God's will. And this guy was dropped into my life. And you want to call it God's will, you want to call it the universe, you want to call it my brother Kevin, who I met this guy through. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a special deal. He's a special guy. He is, one of the lead singers on the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. He is a lifetime, or not, I guess since 19, musical artist, professional recording artist. And he's sober a year and a little over a year. And he's had several cracks at it. And, relapse doesn't have to be part of the process, but it is for a lot of us. It was for me. And it's all good, man. As long as you got one day, you have today. That's awesome. And, Nate kind of shares that with us. Nate Amor is the guy we're about to hear from. He talks about, just living in today, not necessarily scratching and clawing to get today, but living in today and enjoying the day. He also talks about a real crazy run with benzos, what it's like to get off of those, and, just relationship stuff that we find ourselves in and out of addiction, real life stuff. And I think you will find it entertaining, informative, and inspiring. But somebody who always inspires, he inspires Nate, actually. So it's timely that we turn it over, handing the keys to Kevin Souza.
Hello, this is Nate.
Nate, dog, what's up?
Hey, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Really good. We're sitting in California. We're a little chilly. We're at 48 degrees.
Oh, really?
Okay.
But it's early in the morning there too. What is it, 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah, 10 o'clock. Oh, we creeped up to 52. But it's 0 degrees where I'm originally from in Minnesota, so this is very welcome.
And it's recently welcome. I mean, you relocated there from Minneapolis, what, like 3 months ago, 2 months ago, 2 weeks ago?
Not even. It's been 1 month as of it's been 1 month and 3 days.
Okay. And one thing I want to know, I've gotten to know you a little bit, but I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Is it Amore or Amor?
Amor. That is the way. Just the universal language of love.
So what's up with you today? You doing like so? Did you have to do anything for work, or you just like
yeah? I mean,
work out. What'd you do?
It's pretty much just the routine and structure is in place. I'm about to break that because I do have to go back to Minnesota tonight for a few days, but basically, I work, making websites for a company in St. Paul, Minnesota, from 7 to 3 every day. I break that up with some recovery work in the middle of the day. Work out after work. Hang out at the beach every morning, at the pier. Read the morning devotionals and rinse and repeat. I mean, it's a really great life here. It's a great structure. I was so used to the monotony of Minnesota being, stuck. You have to bundle up, 0 degrees. So you got to bundle up in the winter, and then I would drive to the office, and that's a half hour, usually in bad weather, snow, ice, and then just huddle up inside with space heaters and then by the time you leave work, it's pitch black at 5 p.m. and you're bundled up again, and you're driving another half hour to an hour home. And so this life, I wake up, walk down to the beach, see the ocean, connect with God, come back, and it's just minutes. I'm walking everywhere. I mean, it's just night and day, man.
How much time are you able to devote to your work as an artist? So are you considered the lead singer for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra?
No, I would say it's a shared lead role because
Okay.
we all play different parts. We all sing different songs. The current tour, the way it's been set up the last few years, I've been playing the bum, the homeless man who kind of witnesses a story of a young girl who's ran away from home and he notices a bartender that takes all the money from the bar drawer, gives it to her so she can get back home to her family. Real touching story. And my job is to sing a song that kind of conveys that story. And then sometimes I'll have a song that's, a little more, rock, arena rock that's separate from that.
Yeah. And they are arenas that are packed to the brim.
Yeah, it's been amazing because, my career started with, playing bars. I mean, my music, my personal Nate Amor music career is really just, pop rock. It's, John Mayer.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's like, I've listened to your stuff. It's great. And it's John Mayer is the first name that came to mind.
Yeah. So it's a little more in that vein, whereas, so it doesn't quite match with this arena rock, kind of heavier vibe, but the voice did. So, 3-4 years ago, they saw me singing Tennessee Whiskey on YouTube and then asked me to come and audition for them because they liked the little grovel, the little dirt.
So you go to The Voice, and we're gonna get to the recovery in a second, but you go to The Voice. Now, what is that like? When you show, is it one of those things, because you were already established as a singer? I mean, clearly you were, I can't speak for you, but it seems like you had comfort in your own skin. You were successful. You've been playing for a while, but this is the shot, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was I've really started in like 1999, 2000 with my own personal career going out, and then it became bars 5 times a week, and I was just kind of going nowhere. And then in 2012, about 12, 13 years after I started, The Voice came in. I was living in Nashville at the time. The Voice came into town, and I was like, you know what? I just feel like wheels are spinning. I need some sort of break. I can't seem to catch one. So I went to the arena where they held the auditions, waited in line for, I don't know, probably like 6 hours with, 100,000 other people. It felt like, I think it was more like 10, 20,000, but that's happening, like 10, 15, 20 cities around the United States, and then they whittle it down to 120 contestants to get in front of those 4 chairs. And that process takes, 5, 6 auditions to finally get to the chairs in several months. So it felt like it was a trip, it felt like this is my ticket. I picked the song "Walking in Memphis" by Mark Cohn.
Yeah. And
Adam Levine. I didn't get any chairs to turn. I always tell people, well, yeah, all 4 chairs turned. But it was a little late. They turned. So, and Levine, he looked at me.
Eventually, they're all going to turn, right?
Yeah, but they have to at some point. Yeah. I had some friends and family in the back watching. And they were hovering closely over the buttons, Adam and Blake. But basically at the end, it was kind of, Adam told me he wanted to hear me really rip, explode. And I picked a safe song. I picked a song that I had done, 20 years that just didn't have all the vocal chops, like a Tennessee Whiskey with all that dirt in it, But,
yeah,
live and learn, right?
Yeah, well, live and learn, and you're doing pretty damn well now. I want to. By the way, were you sober during that audition? And I don't mean sober at that time. If you weren't, please tell me. But I mean, overall, were you sober at that phase in your life? Because I know you part of your story is, hey man, relapse or checking out of the program, whatever you want to call it. Unfortunately, it's part of the process. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't make it back. You did.
Yeah. I think I look at I've got a nice little journal with a relapse kind of timeline. And I kept that and I wrote that because I wanted to see the common thread, which was always, well, when I look back at it now, it's always my will kind of takes back over, and I'm going to try things my way. And it doesn't mean that I was going to go drink right away. It's just, I don't think I need that. I don't think I need the meetings or the sponsor, they're cool, but, and then eventually I end up drinking again very innocently. But at that time on The Voice, I went to treatment in 2006. And by the time I got to The Voice in 2012, I'd been sober about 6 years when I got there. So I had some good recovery in me. But it was right after that, a couple months after The Voice, where I didn't get the chair to turn. I didn't make the team. I kind of went into self-pity mode. I hadn't been to meetings in so long.
How long had you stopped?
Oh, God, probably a year and a half.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Of no meetings, no sponsor. It turns into, self-will run riot. And for a while it was fine until it's not. And then and then I was left to my own devices. I ended up ending a relationship a couple months after that. Voice didn't work. And that combination of no program and no work individually, it was easy to just crack a beer. And then I was back for 2-3 months.
Do you remember what went through your mind, Nate, before you cracked that beer or you took whatever? What were the thoughts that went through your mind?
It's always been in the efforts, I won't say the word, but
yeah.
You know what I mean, where it's
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. You get far enough away.
Yeah.
You push everyone away far enough, long enough where the efforts are easier. It's just like, well, screw it. I might as well. I mean, that was that feeling of escape worked for me before. Maybe it'll work this time,
Yeah.
Let me try one more time. My friends can do it. Yeah. So it's silly. I laugh at it now because.
Because you're sober more than a year.
Right. And I've had 6 of those times, and the theme has always been the same. It's like, how many times will you say this time will be different? How many times have you heard that from everyone else in recovery? So it's like, God willing, today is one day that I've got sober, and that's kind of where I'm really trying to focus on. Not counting days anymore.
Well, and so in the spirit of honesty, your sponsor is Kevin S., a guy who I know very well. And
yeah,
and it's so crazy because Kevin, my brother, he meets you on I guess leading up to the tour for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. You guys click, and I mean really click, and then we're off to the races. And I'm talking to him. I don't know, maybe it was a little before Christmas, and he was just talking to me about this great dude he met, and this guy's sober too, and man, that thread of magic comes through today in talking to you. That it's so weird, that bond. It's a God thing, or it's whatever somebody wants to call it, but it's a beautiful situation that you meet my brother, I meet you when I'm out there in California with my other brother Mike, and now here you and I are talking, and hopefully helping some people through this.
Yeah, I liken it to the first meeting, first several meetings I went to. I heard it at some point. It was said, you need to get a sponsor. And then after that, it was, well, find someone that has what you want, right? And so it was exactly that. I was sitting down at lunch, and someone had mentioned Kevin was a cool dude. And so I looked at him, and I was like, that looks like a cool dude. And then so I sat down, introduced myself, and then you get to talking, and you're like, wow, this guy's a good hang. And then you find out similarities. The next thing you know, it was just easy, and I think that's, like you say, you call it God, wherever you want. But for me, God definitely put us together. and all of that lined up. You know, I'd always wanted to get out of Minnesota, especially in the winters, and I'd always wanted to be in California. Well, all the things lined up, you know, based on last year in me giving up my will and just trying to follow God's will for my own.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it seems like things are unfolding for you. If my brother he's a lot of things, and one of the things he has always been, dude, is cool. I'm not cool. My brother Michael, the jury's out on that, but I would say meh. But Kevin has always just been a cool dude, and that's cool to hear you say that. So I want to go back, Nate. When was the first time you remember, you know, taking alcohol on or drugs?
Yeah, well, I mean, drugs were never a thing. My mom always told me that I would die if I ever tried drugs. And I don't know if that was the right thing to say to a young child, but it did scare me. So I think the closest I got was I saw cocaine in the back of a show once, and I did the detective thing where I licked my finger, touched the coke, put it under my lip, and I was like, why do they do that? Oh, my lip turned numb. I was like, I get it now.
Yeah.
And that was my experience with any hard drug, was just, you know, I never tried it, but I had to try the detective trick. But as far as booze, I mean, booze was my thing, you know, and it just, my parents didn't drink, you know, I was adopted, so I didn't know my biological parents, but my adopted parents that I grew up with, they didn't really drink much. My mom said, you know, before she married my dad, that he had to quit drinking or she wasn't going to marry him. And so I saw him once in a while have maybe a couple too many, but it was very rare. She was always reining him in. So I just remember one time for no reason at all, I was uncomfortable. I was always uncomfortable. I felt like I lacked an identity. The adoption thing was confusing. I didn't know who I was. And one morning at like 16 years old is the first time I remember. I don't know why, but I grabbed the vodka bottle and I just slammed it before my ride came at like 7 a.m.
Before school.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember just like, wow, this feeling of like such ease and comfort, you know, on the way to school. It lasted for a long time, this euphoria, you know, this 1 to 2 hours. And it was in my second period that this friend of mine, Mark, in class was like, man, you reek. What is that? And I was like, you know, and I told him I didn't really think it didn't know much about alcohol. It didn't know anything about alcoholism. I mean, my parents had that stuff in the cupboard probably for 20 years. And I just told him, I was like, well, I drank the vodka that was in my mom's cabinet. I don't know. I just slammed it. I don't know why. And he's like, dude, that's pretty messed up, man. And, you know, I found out later his dad was in recovery. So for him, he kind of knew.
Yeah.
For me, it was this ease, you know, and I didn't do it again for, I don't know, probably 6 months, a year. I mean, I didn't do it every day at that point. I just kind of knew there was a solution, you know, if I did need it, you know.
What were your interests like in high school? Were you always into music, or you're growing up, I guess, outside of Minneapolis, right? Is that right?
Yeah, at that point, it was like in a suburb of St. Paul.
Okay.
Because I grew up in Shoreview, it's called, and I was going to, we moved from Pequot Lakes, which is up north in Minnesota, very small town.
How old were you when you moved?
I was about 10 or 11, and I had a really hard time fitting in. You know, we wore the same Wranglers, you know, 3-4 days in a row in a small town.
Yeah.
You get to the big city, and the kids are like, "You're not wearing jabots or whatever."
You're pegging your pants or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just. I was just, you know, I wouldn't say bullied, but because I was pretty big, so I don't think the kids really wanted to try to beat me up, but they did. You know, words were pretty hurtful, and it was. Yeah, I was a nerd. I was basically a total nerd until 11th grade in high school. So from the time we moved, the small town, I was popular and cool. We get to the big town at 10, 11 years old. I'm a nerd all the way till 16, 17. And what changed was, you know, my mom had brought home this karaoke little box thing, and she liked singing. She wasn't great at it, that's for sure. But she would leave. She left it in the basement, and I just one day I went over and I looked at what tapes there were. There was an Elvis tape there, and so I just started kind of mimicking what I heard, and I remember I was like, you know what? I was like, as the snow flies. I started singing In the Ghetto, and I was like, I sound pretty similar. And then there's this talent show coming up at school. I was like, you know what? I don't know where I got the cojones to do it, but I was like, let's just enter it. So I entered it. I sang In the Ghetto. I did the sideburns, the whole Elvis jump.
Give us a little In the Ghetto right now.
On a cold and gray Chicago morning, and another little baby child is born. Yeah, maybe I'm not quite there anymore.
That's pretty damn good.
So, and I had the lip snarl and the whole thing. I worked it up.
Was that it now? And now, how intoxicating was that for you?
Well, and that's a great word for it because, years later and lots of therapy and things, I found that, I was looking for that acceptance, and that bottle a few times here and there gave me the comfort. But when I got on that stage, 1,000 peers, that was acceptance that I hadn't felt before. I didn't feel real accepted at home, but when on that stage, the applause, the performing, it was like, whoa, this is it. So at 17, I'm like, now I won first place on that talent show, and I was like, okay. Suddenly I wasn't a nerd. Everyone's calling me Elvis. They want to hang out with me. I'm like, okay, this is it. So I followed that, I graduated high school, went right to college at the University of Minnesota, and instead of going to classes, I was booking gigs singing Elvis.
Yeah. Oh, so you were almost like an Elvis impersonator for a little bit?
For a little bit. So a friend of mine, Brian, his name GB Layton is his band name, and he big deal in the Twin Cities, real established singer, songwriter, musician. He came to one of my shows, and I was 19 at the time. He was 20 something, and he came up to me after. He was real honest. He said, "Bro, you either got to move to Vegas to make this thing work, or you got to write your own material. I mean, you're singing Elvis songs, dude. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so then I started writing my own songs, but then alcohol started coming in right after that.
Did that enhance the creativity leading to the songwriting, or did it kind of debilitate it long term?
Nah, I hear people say that. That's such BS. Like, no, it made everything worse. You think it makes things better, but people talk about that with psychedelics, marijuana, all the other things. It's like, I tried marijuana a few times, and I felt really euphoric a couple of times on it and thought, ooh, I'm writing amazing. But no, the best material for me that I've ever written has been completely sober. And that's for me how it works. So I don't buy into that. Oh, it was amazing when I was wasted.
Yeah.
It made me lazy, and it made, if anything, it pretty much stalled my career for years until that voice thing happened.
What's it like when your office space is basically a bar, or an environment where, drinking is promoted and plentiful?
Oh, geez. Well, see, and that's where, it's about 2002, and I meet my ex-wife now at a bar, and she's a model, and she's out in the crowd, and it's just that rock and roll lifestyle thing where it's just as many drinks as you want. It's all free. You're also getting paid every night. Then there's a model out there. She likes you. Next thing you know, you're pregnant. Next thing you know, you got to do the right thing, get married. And whoa, just a whirlwind.
Yeah.
You're not even thinking. It's just, this is life now. And she, of course, when she was pregnant, stopped drinking, but I didn't.
So you guys were drinking a lot together.
It was a party, yeah. I mean, I went to Hawaii to propose, and I ended up, I don't know how much alcohol was involved, but I used it to get comfortable, and I couldn't just ask her to marry me. I don't think I even knew what marriage really meant at that time, or what it even was. I mean, I was 20 some years old. So it's one of those things where we look back at it now. She's remarried happily with two other children, and she's a great mom, and we've got two beautiful kids together now that are 17 and 18 years old. But back then, it was for me, it was a crisis. Being a father scared the hell out of me, and it scared me to get sober the first time.
Did she push you at all? Was there any consequence or jumping off point?
Yeah, there was this. He's still my uncle. I call him, uncle-in-law. He's been sober now, I don't know, 20 some years still. Back at that point, he was, 5 years in, and so he'd see me at family functions and be like, "Hey, man, they talk about suggesting that, our way, to people and not shoving it down throats." So he was a great example of someone that was just like, if you need help, give me a call. Here's my number. Because he noticed my behavior. Even when I wasn't drinking, just kind of the white knuckling. And I think he saw that I needed something more. So I went to a meeting with him first, and but at that point, alcohol wasn't my problem, is what I said, because I had a rattle in my pocket at that point. I said I never did drugs. Well, that was illegal drugs. I was hooked at that point on benzos.
Oh, okay.
Really bad. But I didn't think anything of it. The rattle in my pocket was a prescription. The doctor gave it to me because I had anxiety because I was drinking 20 some drinks a day. Suddenly I've got anxiety.
Yeah, no shit.
Go figure.
Yeah.
And our wonderful system, our modern medicine was like, "Hey, you're shaking, you're nervous. Here, have some Ativan." Okay. And then it was just 5 years of, I didn't drink much. I'd go here and there to AA to appease, my wife at the time and family members. But I had lots of Klonopin, Xanax, Ativan all day, every day.
When you look back on that, until when?
2006. I was near death, and I'm not an alcoholic. I just have a problem with these benzos, is what I would say.
Yeah, but the problem got out of hand.
Yeah, and that was before the realization for me that it's all the same. I mean, given the chance, with me and my will in the driver's seat of life, I will abuse everything.
Yeah.
I think I ate 6 brownies before we talked today. So I'm still...
You made brownies for the Super Bowl party. If they're the same brownies, they're damn good brownies. So I think I had about 4 or 5 of them. It was split amongst 8 or 9 people.
Yeah, they are the same. And there was this mentality, I got a flight today at 4 p.m. Well, I don't want to throw the brownies out. It was that same thing with the alcohol. You don't want to leave a half glass of wine on the table.
Yeah.
What a waste.
What is, I wanted to ask you though, so people that don't know, you're taking benzos every day for 6 years. It's almost like and I have a great memory, but I look back on some of those times, that's a real hazy recollection for me.
Yeah. I mean, it was explained to me in treatment from the doctor that, here's what you did, basically. The benzodiazepines work on the same neural pathways as the alcohol did. So for my alcoholic brain, this was just a different delivery system for the same effect, which is comfort. I'm a comfort addict. I needed to be comfortable at all times. Don't feel the pain. Don't feel discomfort. So pop the pill, just like taking a shot,
Mm-hmm.
But it's undetectable, but the whole time it's
until you take too many. Right.
Yeah. And it's just killing. It's just slowly destroying your brain, to the point where when I was in treatment, I'm looking at the clock. At one point, the second hand was going backwards, and I'm like, literally, it was moving to the left.
And this is sober.
Yeah.
After all that
my
nonsense.
My mind was gone. I spent 21 days in that treatment center, and when I got out, I was not in good shape. I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't work. I couldn't get off the couch. I mean, they put me on serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the Prozacs, the Zoloft's. I was, for 10 years, I was like a little lab rat from 2006 to 2016, just bouncing around, on different meds. And then that lie came in. Well, I was only really addicted to benzos. I mean, I went to treatment for benzos. I could still drink. Maybe that'll help me feel normal. That lie. I mean, it's just crazy. You talk about insanity. I mean, the fact that my brain could say to myself, like, oh, you forgot about the fact that you drank those 20, 30 drinks a day, got really anxious to get on the benzo.
Yeah.
How do you forget that part? Well, because you want, the addict wants its fix, so.
Because you want to forget. And it's amazing and that's where it it is an overwhelming disease obsession. It's a subconscious. You don't realize what you're doing to your mind as far as convincing yourself and the rationalization.
No, you have no. I mean, it's amazing the deals you make with yourself, and with God, because my faith was still.
Yeah, you have very
I mean,
strong faith, and that's a big part of your program, a big part of who you are. Yeah,
and for all, I said this at a meeting the other day. I was like, some of that was kind of a problem too, because I would say to myself, well, my God is bigger than, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I'd use verses and scriptures to do this. But the realization I found was that, well, God, isn't enough, he's the most important for me. But that alone, I mean, I always say my higher power, he had 12 homeboys with him at all times. Like he went away to be alone to pray once in a while, but like that was kind of a lesson I just missed out on. I just chose not to listen to. I need community. I need a group of people that are like-minded around me, and God with that to complete it. And once I go away from that, I can get right back to that journal entry with the relapses and go, oh, it's the same common thread. You were alone thinking that you could manage life on its own.
It always ends with isolation, though, dude. Like for me, at the end of my drinking and drug usage, man, it was just me. It was me, and I tell people when my cell phone rang, Young Jeezy played, and my parents were playing my cell phone bill. I mean, it was a disaster. I'm in my early 30s, not young at all, and I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, and I got no clue. I have no perception on reality. I think my life is great. I think if I can get $10 to get down to the bar, take a benzo, take some speed, and drink $25 drafts. Like if I can keep this up, my life for the rest of my life, I'm golden. And I believed it, dude.
It's crazy, man.
It's insane. One thing I want to ask you, just as kind of I think what makes people in recovery experts is experience, and you've got your doctorate in benzos. What do you tell people, or what would you tell someone that asks? Because I've worked with guys that come into recovery off benzos, and they are like, my one buddy, everything was brutal. He must have said the word brutal a million times in the first month I knew him, because that's what that stuff does to you. Like, what would you tell someone who says, man, I can't do it, Nate. Like, I can't get off this shit. It's not worth it. I tried before, and after that 21 days, I still couldn't see straight.
Yeah, well, I would say the storm will pass, but it's a longer storm than usual, and it's going to be different for everyone, but it will pass. I mean, and that was the thing I had to keep telling myself. You get sometimes you get into the eye of the hurricane, and things would feel calm and okay for a while, and then you're like, oh, I guess I'm not done. Storm would start again.
Yeah.
Anxiety. I couldn't see straight. It felt like everything felt foggy, and just, I mean, it damages your brain to, so it takes the brain. They always talk about, like, sometimes it takes, maybe half the time that you were using to correct the brain on benzos. So then it would take it, it felt like math that it was about 2.5, 3 years till I really felt, quote unquote, normal. And in not having any more of the weird. It happened suddenly out of the blue. It was like I walked outside one day and I was like, wow, I could see all the colors again. Like the greens were green, the blues were blue. There was no haze, there was no fog, and I just kind of I almost went down to my knees and just gratitude to God, saying thanks for taking this from me, because this was a long time. I get emotional thinking about that because I haven't had a benzodiazepine since 2006, and there were times when I know that that's where it's going again. When I had the other relapses in there, the 6 times, every time there was a moment of hangover or terrible feeling from drinking where I was like, God, maybe I should just get a Xanax. And it was going back. It was almost there every time, and that's scared me enough to go, no, I know what I need to do, and I need to go do that. I would just say to those people, hang on, man. Hang in there.
Yeah. But I like what you said, though. I mean, sometimes it's different for everybody, and this storm can take a little while to pass. But to your story, when you hit your knees, is it does pass, and it's way better when it passes. Better than you could ever imagine at the time when you're going through it. I always equate it to this, because you work out, you run. It's one of those things where you see a guy, if you ever see a guy who's running in the pouring rain, right? If you're like driving by him in your warm car and it's 40 degrees and a guy's running, it's like, that's like the worst thing to run in my opinion. And it looks impossible. And you're like, I can't believe that maniac is doing that right now. But then you go on a run, the start of the run is nice and sunny and warm. And then that weather turns and it's like, and then you're the guy in the middle of the storm, but you're still going forward. And then the next thing you know, you're either back at home or the clouds break and the sun's out again. It's like, we always think, man, I can't do that. But the next thing you know, you're doing it. And then you're through it. I mean, that's a lot easier than getting off benzos, right? Running in the rain. But I think you see my point. Like, and that's the cool thing, man. Like, you're able to share that, and hopefully somebody listening, because I know that that's a juggernaut, man. People getting off benzos. It's a long road, but I mean, man, to hear that and that's how bad it was, right? Of all the relapses, you still were like, no, man, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. But eventually, I mean, it's not off the table, right? We're addicts.
Yeah, we'll go there. Yeah, no question.
So
we'll go there. And
when you got back from rehab, when you get done those 21 days, are you going to meetings, or are you just like, benzos are my problem, and you're kind of white knuckling the whole deal?
Well, I think I ran into this like another fight with God of my understanding recovery groups that were at that time in 2006. There was this boom of what's called Celebrate Recovery,
sure.
which is basically a Christ-centered recovery program, and it started fine, the group I was in, but eventually it always seems that the traditions of the program of AA are put in place so that personalities don't get involved and mess things up, and so things just changed too much in that program, and I kind of went with those changes. Like, again, there was this doctrine of God can be enough, really, that wasn't outright taught, but I took it to mean that I don't really need the group then if all I need is God. They turned the 12 steps into 8 steps and biblical principles that are awesome, but it's cool. But I don't think that, for me, I had to understand that for me, and I can't, I don't want to put it down. It works.
Yeah, I know you're trying not to, and I get it.
But for me, personally, I found out through that process, and then a relapse, that happened in 2012 because of not having a program, because it basically left Celebrate Recovery to be, on my own.
Yeah.
And I went to a few AA meetings, but then I was like, well, I don't like this because it doesn't have what that had. And it became this comparing game. and ego, my ego got involved. And so AA is for me, and I'm not out promoting it because again, the traditions are in place for a reason. I'm not going to be on Instagram going, "Hey, I'm going to this AA meeting at this time because it's dope and it's awesome." And it's like, no, that's anonymity is, very important. So I'm like, I ain't going to tell anyone where I'm going, what meetings I'm going to, and not and what I'm learning. It's just, it has to be that way. It just works. And it keeps my head out of it. If I get involved in any decisions whatsoever, it's just not a good thing.
Well, it's like on either side of the coin, there's people who are, hey, I'm not into God at all, and they're the opposite, right? And then they can compare themselves out. And then there's people who, hey, I'm really into God. Let me do Celebrate Recovery. And then it's like either way, you from what I've experienced, because I've been on both sides, you lose when you're on the debate squad. It's like I'm just dumb enough to get this thing, right? Don't overthink it. Get your ass in a meeting, sit down, and just be there. Just be. And that's all. Just be. I mean, I need to do that more often nowadays. And then just let it happen to you. But you've got to show up. And if you say you can't make friends, well, just stand still after the prayer, after a meeting, and just count to 60. And somebody will end up talking to you. Count to 30 if you feel 60 is weird. It probably is too long. But you get my point. I've done it before. I literally have stood there. I haven't counted, but I've just been like, all right, just let me stand here. And somebody ends up talking to you. And then maybe if it's not that time, the next time you're the last person to leave the meeting. And you just feel, because it's that tribal element that really has worked for me, that I'm just so drawn to. So back to you, you take me through to like 2016. Like what's happening, because did you not drink for 7 years, right?
6. It was 6, and then it was the relationship ending in 2012, along with the voice not.
Is a new relationship, right?
Yeah, it was the first relationship after my divorce.
Okay.
From my ex-wife 1.
Here we go. Frank got the scorecard at home.
Yeah. So
don't worry, Nate. I couldn't even get. I was so fucked up. I couldn't even get anybody to marry me. So, all right, back to you.
Yeah, dude. I was dishonest. What happens is, besides just white knuckling it, the thing that we talk about is, the things that made you not a great person while you were drinking come back into play, the character defects. So suddenly, I thought it was okay to tell the girl that I met, that I was divorced when the divorce wasn't final. It was just a little white lie. It was going to be final eventually. I mean, and I held on to that, and I asked this girl to marry me when I wasn't even divorced yet. I mean, that's insanity. That's not being honest. So that
by the way, that happens more than you think, but it is dishonest, and it is,
right.
We know what's right and wrong.
Yeah, and I knew right away. I knew the moment it came out of my mouth that I was like, I should correct that real quick. Well, I didn't, and I can't say that it's just simply because I didn't have a program, but I think now rigorous honesty is a huge thing in my life. So, fast forward, she finds out I'm not divorced, and obviously is extremely hurt. It broke the trust. It broke the relationship, and I just went right to the. And that
this is because you've told me the story before. She never recovered from that, and that's a pretty big consequence. Is somebody that you love, you tell what you consider or tell yourself as a white lie, and then they are just so shattered by it, and trust is broken, and then that's a wrap. And part of me is like, good for her, because you don't see it that often, right? But I was thinking about when you were telling me that when we were at lunch last week, I was like, what? Probably a real estimable person to be like, I just can't,
I was, looking back, I'm like, wow, good for her, because she tried, to forgive. I was, for me being the, I'm back to drinking again. It's going to be different this time. So I'm telling her these things, like she knows, I think, so it's like, I'm saying things are going to be different. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. And it's like, no, good for her. She held to her guns and was just like, it's just not. So I moved back I'm in Nashville at that time, I moved back.
What's going on with the music career, by the way? Like, we talked a little bit about The Voice and the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, what you're doing now, but like as far as being a recording artist, are you flirting with record deals? Are you having success there? Are you making money? You're making money. You're making a living and you're recording.
Yeah. So we had, after The Voice, I had the relapse I had there after the 6 years of sobriety and after the breakup was about a 4 or 5 month using experience. And I think in order to get her back, I was like, well, I'll go back to, I don't know that second attempt at recovery was really for me, but whatever. I was in that program. And then I was at the church in Nashville too at that time. And then I was serving there. I was, leading worship, singing songs on the weekend and digging into my faith and staying sober and actually going to meetings. But then the divorce being final, the kids, they had moved back to Minnesota with my ex. And so I found myself in Nashville going every other week driving to Minnesota and back. It's 13 hours one way or I'm flying. And it's just expensive and so much work that I had to finally say to myself, what's better? I've got this great community in Nashville with, I'm writing songs with these people, blah, blah, blah. But is that more important than a relationship with my kids when they're, 4 and 6 years old and being a father to them now? And I was like, yeah, that was an easy answer. So I moved back to Minnesota in 2013. And then I found a church up in the Twin Cities and I just kind of threw myself into, I said, forget the music, forget my career. I'm just going to, be a worship leader at this church, sing songs on Sundays, raise my kids. And so I did that. But it kind of, I kind of went, like we do, I went too far to that side. I went way into the started getting more like religious instead of the way I love it now, where it's just I have a relationship with God and it's different. Back then it was like kind of a man-made thing where it became, I met this girl at the church. My mom would say things to me like, you're going to meet a really nice girl at the church. I took her to mean that, well, then that means I'm only going to meet a girl at the church. So I started looking, really. And I met the girl, and we got engaged, I don't know, 4 or 5 months into dating, and then
and you meet her singing at the church, right? You're singing together. Yeah. Is there pressure to keep that type of relationship together?
Big time. The staff is saying things like, you can't do certain things together until you're married. There were some rules and things, that make your job, your career, in jeopardy if you do. So it's like, okay. It did feel, there was pressure that, I put on myself, that was not the way that I see things now. So we ended up getting married.
And those churches you're singing at, and this is because I don't know, there's some do re mi in that. Like you're making money. You is that a full-time job? Yeah,
exactly. I'm making full-time career money. Doing great, singing songs
with the woman you love. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. RogueCon 23. That's right. It is here. It's not back. It's here. It's the first one. Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It is all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues, January 20th through the 22nd of 2023. Now, if you want to go, you got to get tickets, and tickets are on sale at RogueCon23.com. That's RogueCon, RogueCon 23.com. Be there. I'm going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.
Yeah, and then and we're both sober, and we actually go to a Friday night meeting together, but it was within a couple months of marriage that she's decided I'm going to go back to puffing a little bit, and so 2 months after that, I decide, well, then I'm going to just drink like a gentleman. Then I mean,
Yeah.
And then I start using scripture, Jesus turned water into wine.
Whatever it takes.
Drank. Yeah, I mean, it was, and then it was off, and then I was off again, and that drove her into the arms of her ex, and I can take responsibility for my part in that. It's not all on her, and we ended that marriage really quick.
How long were you married for?
I think it was literally a year, just over a year, and it was. It was difficult, but it was like, okay, how many lessons now have I learned? Not only recovery, but just
life. I can relate, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, and so so she's remarried now, has a baby, happy. I mean, I'm happy for her and really grateful for that relationship.
But she gets back with her ex, and whether you had a role in that or not. I mean, you say you did, but. And how did that affect you in your drinking? I asked because I know it probably would have affected me.
Oh yeah, I used it for sure. I used it to, medicate further. It's like, well, I'm not good enough then. Did it all the self-pity,
which is really selfish, right? I heard that recently. Like this self-pity is like one of the most selfish things you can do, because all you're doing is thinking about yourself, and you're certainly not thinking about anybody else or helping anybody else.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and that was, I started finally going to added therapy to my regimen back then. And my therapist was really good in letting me know. It was the first time I heard that I'm a comfort addict. A selfish comfort addict, and that I needed to make sure that I stayed tethered daily to my higher power and then to the group. You can't do one without the other. And that was the first time, that was 2016. That's when things are finally starting to make sense. And then that's when I got the call from Trans-Siberian. Like, how does
that whole thing come together? Because that's a huge show. I mean, that's a huge deal. People, it's one of those things that time of year, every year for about 3 months, 4 months. It's everywhere,
Yeah, I mean, and of course I'd heard of it. Chipotle is one of my favorite, foods, I have to admit. And so I was sitting with my kids outside in the summer in Minnesota of 2016. No, it was 2017. Summer 2017, I get a call because I'd been, divorced 2016. Now I'm starting really pushing in hard into recovery and finding myself. No relationship, let's just do life on life's terms. Program, myself, God, group, and kids. Pour into the kids. So then I figure, well, this makes sense. Trans-Siberian calls me. I'm out in the patio at Chipotle, and she says to me, the music director, she says, have you heard of us? I was like, well, yeah, of course. She's like, well, I heard your video, covering Tennessee whiskey, and you've got kind of what we're looking for, vocal style. So would you be willing to come and audition? So, I mean, I hung up the phone and I was like, oh, wow, here I am. I'm 40 years old. I've been trying to quote unquote make it, whatever that is, in the music business, because because make it for me at that karaoke machine and at that talent show was to be as big as Elvis. I mean, that was the goal.
Yeah.
I'm going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to do that. I watched all his documentaries. Like, that's what I'm going to do. Well, you know, fast forward 2017, I'm 40 and I'm like, wow, you know, is this finally, you know, cause like I said earlier, I feel like I stunted my own career, and I don't say that to be like poor me at all. That's what addiction does. It robs, it steals, it takes. Alcohol's a dissolvent. It dissolves things.
Yeah,
and I think
that's what people do. That's what talented people do, dude. That's why the people that succeed are the ones, right? I mean, like, they stay the course most of the time. They're consistent. We take a lot of times, hopefully temporarily, we just take ourselves out. Like you said, we dissolve ourselves. That's what people do. You can be in line next to somebody and they'll just blow themselves up. And you're like, okay, if I just stand here, I'm going to. Jay Leno had a great, it was back in the day when he was a stand-up and he was outside a club in Boston, and it was an open mic night and the line was long. It was the Comedy Boom. And he's in line and it's cold outside and two people get out of line. And he moves up 2 spots and he thinks to himself, so you mean if I just stand here and don't go anywhere? Instead, you know what I mean? Like, I will continue to move forward. And alcoholics, we don't do that, dude. We're moving all over the place, and we're just literally napalm in situations. Like you, an extremely talented guy, you talk about. So that's real. That dissolving is real. So go ahead. So now you're 40 years old, and you're thinking, man, this is it?
Yeah, I'm thinking, you know, if there was the dream of Elvis was like seeing him in documentaries, was always on a stage in front of thousands of people in arenas and in stadiums, you know, and so that was really the dream. I had to define it. It was so loose to say, oh, I'm going to be like Elvis. It's like, well, what does that even mean? Well, so when I dissected what my dream really was, it was to sing in front of massive amounts of people, just like I did at 17 in front of 1,000, but on a bigger platform. And so I was like, wow, you know, so this is kind of an answer to, you know, prayer and the dream fulfilled. Now, did I want it to be my own material, my own song? Sure, but I'm not done, you know, with that dream either. So,
no way. You got plenty of tricks left up your sleeve.
Yeah. So when I'm sitting there, you know, I go down to Tampa if there are studios and I audition and things click. You know, I find out I'm going out 2018 to the 2019. I had to wait 1 season to get on, but when I got on, you know, 3 years ago, I had a blast. Now, granted, I was in what I will say was kind of the worst and last terrible relationship, toxic relationship and choice that I made to be in at that time. So there was this dichotomy of like, I'm doing the most incredible thing in my life. My career is you know, God's blessed me beyond measure with this opportunity. And then at home, I've got, you know, someone that is just horrible for me that I need to figure that out. So it was like,
You're
it
torn.
wasn't quite there, you know? And I think that's the thing. It's like, I always thought like, I'm going to arrive, you know? It's like, no, but never. You know, I'm staring at the ocean right now and palm trees are swaying and it's great, but I still struggle at times. Everyone does. So it's like, you're never going to arrive. It's just a daily trip.
And it's like that old guy, if you ever seen the movie Parenthood, he's like, you know, he's talking to, I think it's a grandfather, and he's talking to his grandson or his son, and he's like, you never like cross the goal line. You never spike it. It's never over. You know, it's Jason Robards, it's his character, and it's so true. Because you hear it from people like that, real people like that. And I'm hearing it from you. Like, and that's the beauty of the program, is realizing that like all we have is today. Like you mentioned it, like that's all we have. I have not been doing a good job about that recently. Just live in the now and enjoy it. You know, I you know, what's crazy, you know, Nate and I hung out with my brother Michael, my brother Kevin, Nate and my brother Michael and I had lunch. Nate and I had a meeting out there, and it was just a great time. My brothers and I being together, it was magical. And you know, Patty, Kevin's wife, and I like, since I got back, and I was like yearning for those times. Now, I certainly enjoyed them in the moment, but I had gratitude. Like, man, that was just special. it was just really special, and it makes me want to live more in moments like that, and to just be there, you know. And honestly, addicts, people can relate to this. You can relate to this, Nate. Maybe next time you don't go back for this is me. You don't go back for the 9th brownie. You know what I mean? Like, you just sit still and you listen to other people. Stop chasing shit, dude. Just sit still and hold your place and let it flow over you. So you go to so you're in the orchestra now. When is the last, were you ever drunk, like in circumstances around there? Were you drinking around that time?
No. So what happened when I go back to that toxic relationship? I had been doing the work in post second divorce in 2017. I'm doing the work, and then that was my pattern was, well, then I get away from therapy, from group, from everything, and I meet this girl who loves to party, and I'm like, I think I can do that again. It's the insanity. And but this girl was different. Like, this girl actually had so much trauma in her past, unresolved, never had considered herself to have a problem with alcohol, even though there'd been plenty of consequences. And every red flag I saw, I just threw to the side, because this is a great partnership, because we're so like destructive, so much alcohol. But for me, being older and having had once you have knowledge, you can't unknow. It's like, it's always there in the program. So I'm sitting there drinking with her. There's plenty of times where I'm like, this isn't right. I know that this isn't going to end well. I know where this is going, and I think my lack of consequences, like, it never had anything really bad happen to me, except for like end of relationships. Yeah,
you never had any big consequences. And honestly, you're a put together guy. I mean, people can look him up, Nate Amor, and we'll have your website and everything linked to the pod. But, good looking dude. I can't imagine you. Were you ever like sloppy and a mess? You're pretty put together.
That's kind of the problem too. It's like, you think you can get away with it more because, well, nothing bad's ever happened. It's like, I never slurred. I never stumbled. I never, and it's like, well, there were times when I mixed back in the day the Xanax and the benzos with booze, and I peed the bed. People don't know that stuff, of course, but it's like, I put on a great front when I was drinking. Like, this isn't a problem, and so that's another reason that things were easier to go back to, because I didn't have that big. So anyway, I'm with her. It's toxic. It's terrible. I know this can't last. Finally, I'm like, okay, I'm going to surrender. We had just, moved in together. I think things were like serious, and we had just bought a house together, and I'm going back into the program, and she is definitely not. And so at that point, I'm going to Al-Anon even, because
is this Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Yeah, in Minnesota. Now I'm dealing with someone I'm about to go on the road for the first time with this awesome opportunity, and I'm living with someone who's, I'm not going to say an alcoholic, but is showing the same kind of behaviors I did. And so how do I live with someone like that who's not going to stop the destructive behavior? And in Al-Anon, I learned a lot about, just being loving with detachment, and so I tried that, and I went on the road, and then it was just it was awesome. The road, the first experiences, singing in front of 18,000 people.
What the hell is that like, dude? The first time you walk out, let's put that one thing on ice, because we're going to go right back to it. But what is that like when you walk out in front of 20,000 people and you're performing and you're center stage?
Well, yeah, the beauty of it is that, I don't have to get into details with the ex. The ex did, she ended up going back to her ex-boyfriend while I'm on the road. And
Jesus.
Being on the stage, the first time, the second time, you do 50 shows. Every time it's just the same heightened experience. You're out of body, essentially, it feels like. I mean, it's just amazing. Now, some people would terrify them to death, just like it would terrify me to go be a hairdresser right now.
Yeah.
So, but for me, I was born to do this. So for me, it was the height of where I could get. And, get this, I find out 5 minutes before I got to go up on stage that she's with her ex, basically sleeping with the dude at that moment. And I'm just like,
Jesus,
I'm crushed, and I'm kind of being brought. I've got great brothers on this tour that kind of just, supported me, pat on the back. We'll be here on the side of the stage. You go up, do your thing. And literally for those 4 minutes, I didn't think anything about it. It was probably the best performance I ever had, given what I just found out. And so that kind of showed me, like, okay, but you're in the right place here. And now you know that you're definitely in the wrong place over there. So, but I made the fatal mistake of forgiveness, which is important. I do forgive her now, but I forgave her instantly. I didn't process it. I was like, it's because I'm away.
How did you find out? By the way, how did you find out?
It was just a nightmare. Like, we'd check in every night, and then this one night she didn't call me back, and I'm texting her like, well, what's going on? Like, and then like you've got the home security system where you could tell if the garage doors, everything's,
sure,
smartphones, right? She hadn't been home either, and now it's midnight, and I'm like, whoa,
yeah,
this is weird. So I'm calling her friends. They don't know where she is. Finally, I get a call. I didn't sleep all night. I finally get a call from her at like 9 in the morning. She sounds really strung out, and I just dug into her. I was like, what happened? Where were you?
Yeah.
And she told me she was at his house. Tried to convince me nothing happened.
Yeah.
So, oh geez, I didn't break up with her right away, and I forgave her. She came out on the road 2 weeks later for Christmas, and I did the F it again.
Yeah.
I was like, in order to get this girl to love me, I'm going to do what she does then. I'm going to go back to it, because then she'll accept me, because she liked him because he was a cocaine, meth, and addict, and it was bad boy, I got to be a bad boy. Ridiculous.
I've been there, dude. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, let me throw on a leather jacket, smoke cigarettes, and snort some coke, and everybody's gonna love me. That's not. Yeah,
I'm a freaking rock star now. I'm playing arenas. So I'm gonna live the rock star life, right? It's just totally destructive. Again, on my history, I hadn't been connected to any meetings. I went to one meeting that whole tour. No sponsor. The sponsor I talked to one time told me, hey, man, you have to decide how much insanity do you want to put up with?
Yeah.
Because it's going to cause you to drink again if you don't do it. Well, and sure enough, it's like, so I get back from tour. She and I dissolve. I move into a sober house in Minnesota.
So at that point in time, you guys break up, and you're like, I need to get it together.
Yeah, I moved out of the house. We'll figure out the house thing later. It's COVID just started. I'm living in a house that's going to be a sober house. It's my buddy from high school's house that he bought, that he and his wife are turning into a kind of a woman's sober home. But in the meantime, I can live there as long as I want while they're fixing up and going through the house. I mean, it was amazing the way that all worked out.
Yeah.
And in that house, I started writing what is the album that's coming out in a couple months finally.
Which is?
The album's called Keep Dreaming, and the songs are mostly all about those times in my life of great despair, but sobriety. And, just the feelings of no one, songs like Lose This Way, no one wants to lose that way. And Count on the Rain, there's a song there where, it's like you can count on the pain. It's going to come, but you got to learn from it and bounce back. Just a lot of like recovery themes that meant a lot to me. I wrote most of them in that sober home, and I felt great. And then the tour, I find out, is COVID. It's going to be canceled. It's like, geez. After all this good recovery, and we're not going to do the show. We did a live stream, and again, I was like, I'm not going to be the guy who relapses during COVID. For sure not. I'll do a Zoom meeting. Well, I didn't do one. I didn't do any.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Dude, you weren't the only one. I've talked to a lot of people who not only relapsed, and some people on this podcast not only relapsed during COVID, but I mean, people that had drinking problems, that were alcoholic, just fell off a cliff during COVID. And, luckily some of them are sober. Some of them, of course, man, Nate, they're not even with us anymore. So you're not going to meetings over COVID. You're not unique like that. And then you end up drinking one last time.
Yeah. And that was the last shot. And that was something beautiful about it was, I was single and then had been for nearly a year. And so I felt pretty good in my own skin, like knowing what I didn't want, having come out of that. But when I started drinking again, it was like a gentleman. I had, two glasses of wine the first time again, and real slow. And then I meet a girl, and we start kind of drinking together, and quickly realized it was New Year's Eve of 2020 going into 2021 when I had my last drink, and all of it was, that relapse was like the most innocent, because there was only one time where I actually felt like I got drunk.
Yeah.
I was more in like this obsession, more obsessed with trying to drink normally. It was almost worse than just going off the deep end. And it was torment. Like, I just wanted to drink 10, 15. Instead, I'm doing 2 or 3 and just, like, this is horrible. I want more. It's never going to work out.
And it's that old school, right? Like, belly full of alcohol, head full of AA. It's just like, it doesn't work. When I tried to do that, the times I did, I ended up just getting obliterated because I couldn't, the voices in my head, the rational voices, I just couldn't stand them. And, people out there now know who they are, dealing with that. You're in Minnesota. Your last drink is New Year's Eve or the last run. And then what happens? What's your sobriety date?
I'm actually in Vegas. It's my sobriety date is New Year's Eve. Well, New Year's Day was the first day of non-drinking of 2021. I'm in Vegas. I moved there to be in this relationship, and she and I both looked at each other New Year's Day, and I just told her, here's my history. Here's what I know. I can't do this. And it's like, this has been fine, but I don't want to ever feel like this again. And I like you said, just a head full of AA.
And you don't have to, right? You don't ever have to feel that way again. And you tell yourself that. And what happens? Like, what happens when you go into your first meeting? What changes for you?
Well, what changed was like, I'm so grateful for that relationship. It was very short, but she and I saw in each other that it wasn't ever right, really. We weren't going to go long term. We thought we were when there was drinks and whatever. We got sober together, and it was just kind of this natural, like, I'm going to go back to Minnesota. I'm going to finish what I started before this relationship with you, which is me hang out with my kids, get sober. I go back to the old meetings. I feel a really big sense of like, this is where I belong. yeah, I strayed, but holy crap, I'm so grateful for that relationship. It kind of felt like, well, it didn't kind of. It was for me the fact that God was putting people in my life to direct me back to where I needed to go. Because ultimately, there's a bigger plan developing that he wants to get me to, but I have to get out of the driver's seat long enough to see it, and just we relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. That part of 86 through 88 was ringing through my head. And so there you go. I'm back in Minnesota last summer. I'm digging in. All of a sudden, a tour is going to happen again. Yay!
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, this time, single, no relationship, just completely enjoy it. And not only that, I can't really go anywhere because we're touring again, but we're in quarantine on the tour. There's things in place where, you're not going out to dinners, you're not trying to mingle. So it was even more of an enjoyment where I'm just loving each arena. You look at my Instagram, I posted every show, just in gratitude of the city I was in, of the fitness I could do while I was in that city. I'm not worried about anyone at home. I'm just like in God's plan. For the first time really in my life, that's when I meet Kevin S.
Yeah, my man.
as a bonus to all that, because I'm saying, I'm not really connected with a sponsor that's like, I've always wanted a sponsor that's in my wheelhouse as far as career and understanding being a musician, things like that. All those things lined up with him, and here I am in California, and you get, it just like the gratitude. I can't explain the gratitude enough. All those past relationships, all the relapses, everything is lined up perfectly to where, I love where I'm at. I met a girl recently that actually it looks exactly like all of the things that I wanted without the red flags. And now we're going super slow. So we're not trying to rush in anything, which is a first as well.
Yeah.
It's like being honest, being able to say, hey, really like you. Let's see what God has in store for this. But let's not rush anything. We don't have to force our time together. We've been on 3 dates. We could go a week without seeing each other. It's like, wow, that's a first. It used to be just.
Well, you learn, dude. You learn, and it's like, the theme for me is like, if I'm doing well, I'm surrounded by other people in the program. Like, and I'm saying really surrounded. And what that looks like for me is being honest with people about where I'm at. I can glad hand you all I want and talk to other alcoholics on the phone and show up at meetings and get on Zoom meetings. But if I'm not being honest with people, I'm not checking in, and then I can end up in a crazy toxic relationship, or I can end up just acting all over the place, right? The old habits creep back in because I'm not accountable. Like, it sounds to me like, and I know just the way you're talking, you're talking to your sponsor. You're talking to other guys in the program. I went to a meeting with you, the Monday after the Super Bowl, and it was like, there was this men's group in Hermosa. It was outside. It was packed, and it was cool. And guys knew who you were. And that to me is again, in my experience, that works for me. When I share and I tell people where I'm at, and they know, right? It's like kind of like, oh, I have this group I go to, it's specific, and they don't have to, I don't walk in there and say, oh, it's been 10 days since I've been to a meeting and I'm just glad to be here. And look, dude, if that's what people are doing, that's awesome. You're getting to a meeting, but I know when I'm really vibing is when people know where I'm at in my life and I'm checking in. And it seems like that's kind of what's happening with you, because you mentioned it. It's funny. I really found it interesting when you talked about the God stuff. You mentioned how you could say, oh, I can pray by myself. I can do this alone. But then Jesus had 12 homeboys he ran with. Like the community is real, you know?
Yeah. It's so real. And the only time that, for me, you know, Jesus is a higher power. The only time that he was alone, when it's documented, he was praying to God. He wasn't like, he wasn't documented as out there, you know, hanging with a bunch of different women and partying. You know, it's like he used his alone time to connect to his higher power.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and that's the thing. You know, we always get back to, with the biggest, you know, there's a spiritual solution for this problem. Whether you believe in a light bulb or Jesus, whatever it is, that's what I love about the program. Is like, you don't have to get it all. I mean, I certainly don't. I'll never judge anyone else's faith walk. I'll never, like, for me, that's it. For me, it's in my bubble. What I'm good with works for me on step 2 and 3, and that's great. And what works for Joe works for Joe, and that's great. And we're not sitting there going, well, you're wrong. It's like, no, you're wrong. And we're not arguing about it. It's like what we're doing is we're staying sober each day, asking for God's will.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I still, you know, we're still going to, we read those words, you know, we don't struggle, and we, you know, in 86 or 88, and we read the promises. But the truth is, like, you know, even last week, I was feeling run down, some anxiety, you know, things always, you know, my life is not put together in some beautiful bowl.
Neither is mine. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not, well, I'm not blowing smoke up anyone going, yeah, I got it all figured out. Heck no. I mean, it's like you said earlier with that movie analogy, it's like, you know, we're never going to cross the finish line. And that's the beauty of it. It was just learning every day, trying to improve every day, one day at a time, and sometimes 1 hour at a time, because, you know, I tend to overthink and, you know, try to future forecast. It's like, no, I have to daily reprieve has to be in place. I always think of the water analogy. It's so simple. Like, if I notice if I don't drink water today, I might feel a little bit sluggish the next day. You know, it's like, you got to drink the water every day. You got to stay hydrated. Like,
Yeah.
But water's boring. You know, and sometimes the meeting's boring. But
Yeah.
you always get something out of it. It's for later, you know. It's like,
Well, one more thing I want to ask you, because this is an amazing part of your story. And this is a lot to bite off, because we got about like 4 or 5 more minutes. But you found out, you tracked down, you mentioned you were adopted. You tracked down your parents, you know, your real parents. You didn't track them down, I guess, so much as, or was brought to your attention. What is that like for somebody who was adopted to discover who their parents are and to just kind of go through all of that, process all of it?
yeah, I mean, the quick version is like, there's on my heart, there were things God put on my heart early on in life. And one was I wanted marriage and a family with a woman who was like me, ticked all the boxes, right? And then there was, when I found out I was adopted, then there was, okay, well, let's find out. I don't have to have a relationship with, but I'd like to know, if I have other siblings, what my parents were like, what they did. Because all I got was, you know, at 12 years old, I got told you're adopted. It didn't make much sense to me. I had to ask a girl in middle school later. I was like, what does that mean? You know, I was like, adopted. She's like, well, your parents aren't really your parents by blood. And she explained it, and I was like, whoa, it was kind of a mind trip. And I think that's, you know, it wasn't long after that vodka came in.
Yeah, I was about to ask. Yeah, was there drinking behind that? I'm sure there was.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, that was the start of this identity crisis, where now I'm seeking to understand where I came from. And my parents, God bless them, my mom was, you know, saying things like, you know, these messages of, if you ever found out or tried to find out who your real parents were, it'd be really devastating to me. And so there was this strange, like, control thing about me even finding out. So I felt stuck in that. So, that put a rift between my parents and I, to be honest. And when I went to college, I moved out, and I didn't talk to them for many years. And during that time, I reached out to the adoption agency where I was adopted through. And I got the bad news at 19 years old that, hey, you were adopted, yes. Here's the 3 pieces of paper that describe, without any identifying information, the birth plan. And you can find out when you're 65, all the names and
65.
more identifying stuff. So have a good day and enjoy yourself. So
Yeah.
I remember at that time I was, going to college. I was working, doing maintenance stuff. I was up on a roof when I got the call. I was fixing some shingles. And the first thing I did is I went and got a 6-pack and finished the work that day, drinking. I just felt devastated by that news. And then I just had to resign myself to the fact that I wouldn't find out really any identifying information until I was older. And they do that so that the identities are protected because it's a closed adoption, which they can't do legally anymore, but they could in 77.
Yeah.
So long story short, DNA gets better and better and better, and Ancestry comes out. And, so 2 years ago, one thing that's beautiful about what I call, the most toxic relationship I had, there's some good things that come out of all that. And one of them was she really helped me to want to go try that. She would suggest the Ancestry thing. So I finally did a couple years ago. I got the kit. I spit in the cup. I sent it in. A couple weeks later, I got the results, and I saw my half-sister Stacy, it was her name, on the list. She looked similar to me. She was on this list within the Ancestry app, and I was like, she's got to be. It said likelihood of sibling was like 50% or whatever, with their stats. So I messaged her on the through Ancestry on the app, and she messaged back right away. We exchanged numbers. She called me and just laid out my dad's side. She was from my father's side. Laid everything out brilliantly, beautifully. Started crying, saying, sorry to tell you this, but your dad died at 52. He was, an alcoholic, cocaine addict, and it was just like boom, this bulb went off in my head, like, whoa, my parents never had a problem. Well, that's not true. My biological dad did, and that's does that take
some of the pressure off almost, or is that like a relief to know that, because it is, whether it's inherent or it's not, either way it's a sickness, I believe, and I would imagine that might have been sort of one part depressing but one part liberating.
It was, man. That she sent me pictures of him that night after our phone conversation. I looked at them. And then I looked at myself in the mirror that night, and I was like, there's my identity. And it didn't have to be good. In my mind, I had built up, he was some successful musician, or, I'd be living on a yacht singing songs with my dad. These weird, like, fleeting thoughts you'd have.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, you never know, right? But it didn't matter that it was kind of the opposite. It was, he lived a pretty miserable life, never able to get sober, went to treatment a bunch, could not get it, and it killed him. He died in a snowbank, of heart failure from too much alcohol. It's like, that's where mine goes.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, I feel so terrible for him, but that's what happens if I don't do this on the daily.
Do you ever look at that as like, almost like a gift from him, like that reality and that end of his life, how he died? That's something where he doesn't have to die in vain now because his son is an alcoholic in recovery, and certainly we don't want that, and obviously you don't want that fate.
Yeah, it's amazing because the legacy can start with me, and my kids now, know this, that I can stop the cycle. It doesn't have to keep going. And so, yeah, he gave me that, and God bless my biological mom. I just met her this last October for the first time. Took a bit longer. But she had written in those 3 pieces of paper that were non-identifying that the father was a singer and that he was athletic. And, come to find out that she didn't know exactly who the father was, because my biological father was not a singer, was not athletic, was a drug addict and alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the power of words, the power at 19 years old to read that my dad was a singer and to have just come off that talent show a year before in high school, that just solidified what my identity was going to be. I'm going to be just like my dad. Well, in a way I did. I became the alcoholic who doesn't have to suffer anymore, who's sober. And also the one that didn't exist, the singer. So it's amazing to me how that worked. And, to end that whole thing, so I've met 2 of my 4 siblings on my dad's side. I still have to meet Stacy and Ashley, my sisters, but I met my 2 brothers, half brothers. And then on my mom's side, I had 3 brothers, and just last week, one of them died, and I only met him twice. His name was ironically Nate as well. And he suffered from this disease and didn't get out of it. And depression and anxiety took him to the gates of hell, and he ended his own life. And I got that call last week, and I think that's, when I talked about last week, I started feeling a little bit
I was about to say, that's maybe one of the reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of took some of the wind out of my sails, because I was like, I really on tour this last year, I was connecting a little bit with my other 2 brothers, but I didn't reach out to Nate, and he was very isolated, and all the triggers, all the warning signs, someone that's deep into an addiction. And I saw him drink when we met the first time, and I was like, that's how I used to do it.
Yeah, like somebody who's in pain, right?
Yeah, and he made a couple comments like, I probably drink too much, so, things like that. I really, the lesson is like, okay, I'm in the right place. I know that.
Yeah.
I need to stay sober, because that's where it goes again. Like my dad, now here's a brother on the other side, on the mom's side, who's just ended his life because of the pain. And I'm not sure that they're framing it that way. I think they're framing it more with, he struggled with anxiety and depression. But, in my experience and what
well, you're seeing things clearly, but that's what happens when we're, when I'm out there, I'm not, I can have that guy like your brother, in front of me making those comments and drinking, and it's not a guy who's drinking like pain. It's a guy who's drinking the pain. He's drinking with me. And I don't hear those comments because, it's the same as me. Shit, what are we going to do? 5 o'clock somewhere. It's like, and it's so much different when we're sober, because we can see this stuff for what it is. All right, Nate, I've kept you all day now. It's been 90 minutes. I know you got to make some money here, because you're off tour with the TSB. TSO. Why do I say TSB?
Yeah, baby. Hey, I like that one too.
Where can people find your music? Again, we're going to link all this to it. But where can people find your music? I know you got a website, and Instagram and all that stuff.
Well, real quick, the old artist name was Nathan Anderson. My birth name was Anderson with my adopted family, right? So a couple years ago when I joined Trans-Siberian, there was this piece of paper that said, legal name, and then do you have a stage name? And I was like, oh man, now's the time. Like, I never liked Anderson. It's a very Scandinavian, Minnesota name. I mean, I love my parents, that raised me, but the name for a performer wasn't quite, So I thought, what do I love? I love love. I mean, I wrote a song called Love, Love for my daughter, which coming out soon. But so I changed it to Nate Amor right then and there. It just kind of, I don't know why, it just clicked. What's the universal word Amor instead of Nate Love? Anyway, so NateAmor.com, it's just AMOR. We'll have all the things on it. The first singles, there's really nothing out right now. I mean, the first singles get released.
What's the
in
song?
April,
What's the song
May.
on your webpage when I pull it up? There's a song there.
Oh, that's an acoustic version of one that's coming out on this album called Gone, and that's about my mom's death, my adopted mom that passed. So that's coming out, but it's not done as well, as what's actually coming. Which,
Yeah. All right, we'll wait on it. Just you between you and my brother, I can't get either of you to put out a goddamn album. Everybody's in the studio polishing that shit up,
This has been so long, dude.
Yeah.
I signed to an indie label that had to get formed and created in Minnesota with good buddy Jason, and then I had to find the other management and all these things have to come into place to do it right.
Yeah.
Because you can have a great piece of art, and if you just hang it in your closet, you're the only one that sees it.
Well,
and
I mean,
that's how my music.
And I'm breaking your balls, but it's like with you and my brother, there's two common themes: experience in this business over time, and I know that he has learned because the stuff that I listen to of Kevin's is like the best I've ever heard. I mean, it's like, and in my opinion, like head and shoulders above other stuff. So I'm just like, I'm really excited to for other people to hear the whole thing, as I am with yours. All right, so NateAmor.com, right?
Yep,
And
that'll be it.
Hey, dude, Nate, I can't tell you how much fun this is. I'm sorry I kept you so long, but it's you're an easy guy to talk to, and you're a great dude, man.
Well, hey, we'll edit it down to an hour.
No. I gotta keep it all. I gotta keep it, in post right now. We're gonna leave it all in there, Nate. You're my man. This will probably be up like either tomorrow or Friday, and I'll shoot it over to you.
Oh wow, you're fast. I love it, man. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
You're the man, dude. I appreciate it, Nate. Thank you so much. Say hi to Kevin S. and Patty for me, all right?
Roy, I will say hi to Mike there with you in the studio.
You got it, brother. See ya.
All right, see you, brother.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Join the ultimate celebration of digital content with its creators, passionate fans, and industry experts. It's all happening in downtown Waco across multiple venues on January 20th through the 22nd, 2023. Tickets are on sale now at roguecon23.com.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out Amor, a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the Amor podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.